Now we hear from Dr. Ira Helfand from Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Well, Secretary Gottmuller has described the very difficult work that she's doing to try to lessen the danger of nuclear war. My job today is considerably easier, and it is simply to describe to you what happens if she fails, and why, therefore, it is so particularly important that we all do everything that we can to make sure that her efforts are, in fact, successful. We, as has been observed several times this afternoon, don't talk that much about the use of nuclear weapons anymore, as we did during the Cold War. Since the end of the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, we've all tended to act as though the nuclear danger, especially that aspect of it represented by a large-scale war between the U.S. and Russia, has gone away. But it hasn't. As Secretary Gottmuller pointed out, there are thousands of warheads still in the U.S. and Russian arsenal. I think most alarmingly at this time, there are still at least 1,000 in each arsenal on a very high state of alert, which can be fired in a few minutes, reach targets in the other country in a very short order of time. And we know of at least one occasion since the end of the Cold War when we came within minutes of seeing just this kind of catastrophic exchange of nuclear weapons between the U.S. and Russia. So let me describe to you what happens if these weapons do get used. And I want to start first by describing an attack on one city. I'm going to use, for these purposes, the model of a 20-megaton bomb going off over a large metropolitan area. Now, back in the 1960s, there actually were 20-megaton bombs. That's 20 million tons of TNT in both the Soviet and American arsenals. Since then, the arsenals have been modernized, and a modern attack on a big city like New York or Chicago would involve not one 20-megaton bomb, but maybe 10 or 12 or 15 half-megaton bombs. The megatonnage would be less, but because it would be spread out more effectively over the city, it would actually cause more destruction than the model I'm going to use. But it's difficult to sort of visualize 15 bombs going off all at the same time. And so for our purposes, I think this model of a single large explosion, although it somewhat underestimates the destruction, is adequate. Within 1,000th of a second of the detonation of this bomb, a fireball would form, reaching out for 2 miles in every direction, 4 miles across. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 20 million degrees Fahrenheit, which is hotter than the temperature on the surface of the sun. Everything, the buildings, the trees, the cars, the people, the upper level of the earth itself would be vaporized. To a distance of 4 miles in every direction, the explosion would generate winds in excess of 650 miles per hour and blast pressures greater than 25 pounds per square inch. Mechanical forces of this magnitude can destroy anything that human beings can build. Underground shelters would collapse under these pressures. To a distance of 6 miles in every direction, the heat would be so intense that automobile sheet metal would melt. To a distance of 10 miles in every direction, the explosion would still generate winds in excess of 200 miles per hour and blast pressures greater than 10 pounds per square inch. Forces of that magnitude would totally level masonry buildings, totally level wood frame buildings. A structure like this with steel girders and reinforced concrete would suffer major damage. The walls, the floors, the ceilings would all be swept out. The steel skeleton would be left behind. To a distance of 16 miles in every direction, the heat would be so intense that everything flammable would burn. Paper, wood, cloth, heating oil, gasoline, it would all ignite. Hundreds of thousands of fires, which over the course of the next half hour would coalesce into a firestorm, 32 miles across, covering over 800 square miles. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. All the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. Beyond that, the damage would continue. To a distance of 20 miles in every direction, the heat would still be intense enough that if you were outside, any exposed skin that wasn't covered by clothing would be subject to second and third degree burns. To a distance of 40 miles in every direction, anybody who turned reflexly to look at this sudden flash of light would suffer retinal burning that would cause permanent blindness. An attack with this one bomb on a city like Chicago would kill 6 to 8 million people in the first half hour. And if it were part of a generalized attack on the United States, this kind of devastation would be visited on every single metropolitan area in the United States. A study that we did in 2002 showed that if only 300 of the weapons in the Russian arsenal were exploded over American cities. 95 million people would die in the first half hour. Beyond that, the entire infrastructure of the country would be destroyed. The transportation network, the communication network, the public health system, all the things that we rely on to stay alive. We are not hunter-gatherers or subsistence farmers. We need an intact civilization to provide us with food and with shelter and with fuel to heat our homes. And this would all be gone. Huge areas of the country would be blanketed with radioactive fallout. And in the months following this war, the vast majority of the rest of our population would also die. And if this attack were mirrored by a U.S. counterattack on Russia, the same devastation would befall the entire Russian Federation. But as unimaginable as this level of destruction is, it is not the worst part of the problem. Because the firestorms kindled by these explosions would also cause vast damage to the environment, which would affect everybody on the planet. If just the weapons which are currently deployed by the U.S. and Russia, the ones that are allowed under the START Treaty, the first START Treaty, were involved, they would blast into the upper levels of the atmosphere approximately 150 teragrams, that's 150 million tons of soot from the firestorms generated. This soot would darken the sky, block out the light. And within about 3 days, temperatures across the planet would plummet an average of 8 degrees centigrade. It's about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. In the internal regions of Eurasia and North America, the temperature drops would be closer to 20 to 30 degrees centigrade. For 3 years, there would not be a single day in the Northern Hemisphere free of frost. That means there would be no agriculture, no food production. Ecosystems would collapse. Many species, including most probably our own, would become extinct. Now, this is a danger that we face, and it is a real and present danger, and it is one that demands an urgent and immediate response. We have seen over the last 50 years the leaders of all the nuclear weapons states work with great diligence to prevent a nuclear war. But their important efforts notwithstanding, we are all alive today because on a number of occasions we have been very, very lucky. And a continued hope for good luck is not an adequate security policy for this country or any other country. We need to take concrete steps, and we need to do it quickly. We need to take our nuclear weapons off of their high alert status. This is an action which President Obama can take on his own initiative, and I think we need to encourage him strongly to do that. We need to ratify the New START Treaty, and we need to move on quickly to negotiations for another treaty, a nuclear weapons convention, that will eliminate these weapons completely. Many people say that it is unrealistic to talk about the abolition of nuclear weapons. I disagree strongly with that assessment. Rather, I think it's unrealistic to think that our civilization can continue if we don't eliminate these weapons. These weapons are not, a fact of nature. They're far less an act of God. They are weapons, implements which we have built with our own hands by the decisions which we have taken. And we can and must take the decision to get rid of these weapons. In Deuteronomy, God says, "Behold, I have set before you life and death. Therefore choose life, that you and your children might live." That is literally the decision, the question that mankind faces today. And I pray that we will decide wisely and act with courage so that indeed our children might live. Thank you.